Shabbat Shalom, family and friends. Today's Torah portion is number 27, Tazria, which translates to leprosy. It includes Leviticus chapter 12, verse 1 through the entire chapter 13 of Leviticus. It also includes from the prophets, 2 Kings chapter 4, verse 42 through chapter 5, verse 19. It also includes Psalms 79 and 80. And in the renewed covenant, it includes Matthew chapter 8, verses 1 through 4, chapter 11, verses 2 through 6, and Mark chapter 1, verses 40 through 45. So this week's Torah portion starts off with laws for mothers after childbirth. After a woman gives birth, she is unclean for 7 days. This is similar to when a woman menstruates, that she is unclean for 7 days. Now, please note, these laws related to bodily fluids do not just target women. Even men are considered unclean, say, if they have a seminal emission. These laws really reveal wisdom that is supported by science today. Blood and any bodily fluid visibly contaminated with blood is considered capable of transmitting viruses like hepatitis B, hepatitis C, and HIV. So these are laws that are there to protect God's people. Now, when a woman gives birth to a boy, she is unclean for 7 days, but on the 8th day, the flesh of his foreskin shall be circumcised. She then must stay home for 33 more days in her condition of blood purification. So she's pretty much staying quarantined for 40 days. And 40 days is a significant number of days in the Bible. It's the time of Noah and the ark, when it rained 40 days and 40 nights. The children of Israel wandered in the wilderness for 40 years before going to the promised land. Jesus fasted for 40 days when in the wilderness, and when he was tempted by Satan. And after Jesus resurrected from the dead, he spent 40 days with the disciples before his ascension to heaven. There are other examples throughout Scripture, but 40 days seems to represent a time period used for trial, used for testing, for probation, for purification, for preparing or equipping someone for what's to come. Now, this is a period useful. These 40 days is a period useful for a woman to bond with her baby, but also to be taken care of, to heal, and to recover from one of the hardest things that she would have had to do in her life. Giving birth isn't easy, and it's a reminder of the fallen world we're in and the curse from Eve's sin. I mean, really, until about 100 years ago, I read that about 1 in 10 women died in childbirth. I mean, that's a pretty significant number. I mean, it wasn't uncommon for a woman to die during childbirth. For that would be the reason why her life had ended. So 40 is a significant number. And I don't think it's a coincidence that the average pregnancy is actually 40 weeks long. I mean, even the word quarantine, quarantine comes from 40 giorni, which means 40 days in Italian. I mean, during the Middle Ages, ships arriving in Venice from infected ports were required to sit at anchor for 40 days before landing. And that was the proven amount of time to determine if it was safe for the ship to disembark. So the whole concept of quarantine, I mean, actually started, a lot of it, these ideas came from Scripture, and it has been tried and proven to be an effective way to really keep people safe. Now, if a woman gives birth to a baby girl, everything is doubled. The woman is unclean for 14 days instead of 7. She must stay home for 66 days instead of 33. So she has a double quarantine of 80 days. Now, the Torah doesn't explicitly tell us why this is so. But according to Jewish tradition, this period is twice as long to account for the purity of both the mother and the daughter. Therefore, the time period is twice as long as when a mother gives birth to a son. Baby girls actually many times do have some minor bleeding after they are born. And it's actually caused by the withdrawal of the hormones they were exposed to while they were in the womb. Now, this is one theory as to why a woman after giving birth to a girl would be quarantined for 80 days rather than 40 days. But there are other theories out there. When days of purification are completed, the woman will bring to the priest 2 sacrifices, a burnt offering and a sin offering. The burnt offering is for recognition of sin and the need of atonement and complete dedication to God. Sin offering is primarily for unintentional sin that you didn't know about, or sin that was going to be committed in the future. Now note that the sacrifices are the same whether the baby is a boy or if the baby's a girl. So that undercuts any interpretation that the different lengths of impurity indicate that a baby boy has more or less intrinsic value than a baby girl. So that it's because I know that's one theory that's out there. I mean, the baby boy and the baby girl are worth the same to God. But the question does lie, why is there a need for a sacrifice? Well, in the Bible, death is unclean. So there are laws on touching dead bodies, as that passes uncleanliness. Animals that primarily eat dead waste, such as scavengers, are considered in Scripture unclean. We just noted earlier in this Torah portion that the excretion of blood symbolizes uncleanliness. And really, because the blood contains the life of a body. But when that blood is outside of a body, that's kind of a sign of death. It symbolizes death. So what about a baby? A baby is a new life in the world. So why would there be a burnt or sin offering tied to childbirth? And I believe it's because there is a transmission of spiritual death from parents to their children. Why is childbirth painful and requires time to recover? Well, that was a reminder. That's a curse that came from after Eve had sinned. And it's a reminder of the sin that is being transmitted from the parent to the child. So the next chapter, chapter 13, discusses the test for leprosy. Leprosy is noted in this chapter to show up in 4 places. There's the skin of the body, swelling, scab, a bright spot, hair in the affection turned white and deeper than the skin, is what is written in Scripture. There's also an infection on the head or on the beard. This is an infection that's deeper than the skin, and there is yellowish hair in it. Then there's also an infection on the bald head or the bald forehead, where here we would see a reddish white infection. Then there is leprosy on a garment, whether that garment be wool or linen, and there's a greenish or reddish mark. But regardless of where the leprosy is, it requires the person to be quarantined away from others. This is to prevent the spread of the disease. This is an example of how we love our fellow man as we love ourselves. That we would isolate ourselves and put ourselves in an inconvenient circumstance to protect others. What I also find interesting in this passage is that the garment can also have the disease. And there is provision to cleanse the garment, but with a close eye to ensure that there is no mark of leprosy on it. And this may lead us down another path where there has been a criticism of Scripture where there's questions on, well, how can leprosy infect clothing? Because the way we know leprosy today is that it's an infectious disease caused by bacteria and does not affect inanimate objects like garments. So then the criticism is, was the Bible wrong to talk about leprous garments? And here's where we kind of see some indication that this is not really leprosy how we know it. The disease, which is identified today, we know it's caused by a bacteria. The Hebrew word sara'ath is translated to leprosy, but it's really a more general term for any serious skin disease or sign of infection or defilement on the surface of inanimate objects. The defilement on garments or even walls, as noted in Leviticus chapter 14, which is the next chapter, was probably some type of fungus or mold which attacks those type of materials. Garments found to be infected were burned. Infected houses were cleansed. If the infection could not be eradicated, the houses were demolished and the ruins were taken outside of the city. So this passage may be referring to something more general than just the skin disease that we know of as leprosy, but really anything that causes that type of anything that is infectious, like leprosy, and it's giving us guidelines as to how we should act as a people that love our fellow man and love our fellow brothers. So that was the last thing I wanted to leave you with. I pray that you have a blessed week, and Shabbat Shalom.